welcome back to another episode of Wuhan Weekly, a podcast that follows the trials and tribulations of 4 Scottish teachers in China. I am Lewis Thomas Rowe, and with me this week are Ruth Taylor.
Hello.
Tony Ingalls.
Hi.
And Dean McKinnon-Thompson.
Hello.
So that is our second week that we have finished at school. How did we find this one, guys?
Much better, feeling much more settled into our new job and feeling like the week is going by faster and getting through to a lot more of the kids day to day.
Yeah, 5-day week is much better than a 6-day week. Last week was tiring, but this week was okay. It was good. I feel like I'm learning some more names, which is always nice. I feel like a proper teacher now, being able to call on the naughty kids when they're not paying attention.
It's a learning curve this year, more than anything else. I felt like it went so-so. Room for improvement on my part, on the kids' behaviour part, but it's all good, we'll get there.
So is such a Chinese kid way of saying how you are.
Would you prefer come see, come see?
Yeah, I thought this week was a lot better. Everything I planned actually worked. Okay, so this week we are going to talk about food. So I'd like to thank Taylor for giving us this suggestion. We really appreciate it. We were going to plan on talking about it at some point, but we just moved it forward a couple of weeks. So I guess the first topic we really want to discuss is how is the food here in China different to the stereotypical Chinese takeaway back home in the UK?
The first thing I would say about that is when people say, oh, I'm going to get Chinese food back home, having now experienced what Chinese food is like in China itself, I would say that it's kind of misleading because there is really no such thing as Chinese food. It would be like saying, oh, I'm going to get European food, but that's not a thing. It's like Italian food or Spanish food or French food. It's the same in China because China is all split into provinces. So as you go to different provinces, the food, the cuisine, it changes. So what we get back home is very much like a westernized take on what Chinese food actually is.
Because you'll find that the first question I got asked by all my friends when I got home was, do they have, the chicken nugget balls and the sweet and sour sauce? That was the first thing they said. Oh, you must have loved out there because you just had them the whole time. But that's, I think, Taiwanese maybe?
I don't even know.
I have no idea.
Or maybe it's just something they made in the West. West people like this because of McDonald's and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, Scottish people like it because we'll put it in a deep fat fryer and
right.
then it'll be really successful.
And obviously when you get Chinese takeaway back home, you get chips with it sometimes. But obviously that's not a thing here, but I think everyone at home will probably know that. Things that you would expect, like prawn crackers. Have you had a prawn cracker in China?
No.
Maybe once I had a prawn cracker, but it's not a thing you have.
No, not at all. I find that the food here in China is a lot more like tapas. Say if us 4 went out for dinner, it wouldn't be like, oh, Tony's having kung pao chicken, Ruth is having beef curry or whatever, and I'm having the chicken balls. We'll get maybe 4 or 5 dishes and we'll share them between us. But the plates are a lot more generous than, for example, Spanish tapas. And then you just kind of pick and choose and you share, and it's quite a nice environment to eat in.
One thing I've noticed is the spread of food's a lot more diverse here. You've got everything from aubergines to chicken to beef, all kinds of things. And even vegetarian meals. I mean, it is harder but possible.
Yeah, I think one thing that really isn't in Chinese food back in the UK or any Chinese food that I've eaten is tofu. I really didn't think that would be such a big thing in China, but it really is. You have it in, not almost every meal, but a lot of meals, and we have it quite regularly.
The thing that I find most different is very personal. We would go to this restaurant on Byres Road. Everyone who goes to Glasgow University, who went to Glasgow University, who listens to this will know the Amber restaurant on Byres Road. It's famous Chinese takeaway in Glasgow. We would always get Sichuan chicken there. Sichuan chicken from the Amber restaurant in Glasgow is not like Sichuan chicken, because if you're getting chicken that is made from Sichuan peppers in China, your mouth is going to explode with spice. It feels like you're having a stroke. So it's branded it's all about branding and stuff. It's made to look like Chinese food. It's given Chinese names, throw in a Chinese city or a Chinese province. Oh, it's very authentic. No, not at all. So
I also find here that I don't want to say limiting, but everything is either fried or steamed.
Yeah.
So they don't have a lot of oven-baked goods.
No.
So you'll find that there is quite a diverse amount of foods, but it is either steamed or fried.
But you're right. That in terms of choice here, it's very much limited to those two things.
But maybe we can talk about some of the things that are on the Chinese menu at back home that have some sort of resemblance back here.
Right.
So is there anything that's like really close to the Western food that we call Chinese and actual Chinese food?
Yeah, like chow mein, like fried noodles.
Right.
In Chinese it's chow mian, so it's this almost the same name. And I suppose they're kind of the same. It's hard to really diversify fried noodles, let's be honest. But that's probably something that's quite similar to back home.
And they are a staple, fried noodles are a staple of our diet here.
Yeah.
Especially
Food,
when hungover. Or while still extremely drunk.
Apart from the fried noodles and fried rice, obviously, again, it's kind of hard to get fried rice wrong. I find one of the things that is like the most authentic Chinese food that like we've eaten here and we get back home is just like the beef noodle soup. Because, it's so simple and it's so easy that you can make it literally anywhere. You get people at the side of the road who have got like a little rickety shack that are making beef noodles. I'm guessing that's translated very well going into because like the ingredients are cheap and it tastes good. So I think that also is, very authentic Chinese food back in the West.
Yeah.
I've found all of the soups here are very much like they are back in the UK. Especially like they're very watery. It's not like the thick soup your granny would make.
No.
It's watery, it's very thin, but it's very tasty. I think most of the soups in that regard are pretty much the same kind of shebang.
This probably takes us on to what we're going to talk about next, but when my friend Jamie, hi Jamie, came to visit us, he had a very specific Wuhanese food called reigan mian, which means hot dry noodles. And he told me that when he went home, he went to a Chinese restaurant in the West End of Glasgow, and lo and behold, they were selling reigan mian on the menu there. So crazily, you can get that very authentic Chinese food back home in Scotland.
So obviously, reigan mian is very, very specific to Wuhan, but what is actually in it?
I think it's like boiled steamed noodles made from in a sauce made from like peanut and sesame.
It's like a
sesame sauce. Yeah.
It's very like nutty, and it's traditionally a breakfast food in Wuhan. Although you can buy it pretty much at any point of the day. But like that's like a thing here. Like breakfast in China is not like breakfast for us back home. Like we would have like cereal, toast, like a fry up. Here you have like noodles or dumplings or steamed
baozi or something
baozi, yeah.
On breakfast foods, there's youtiao, which is basically like a long, thin bit of bread that they deep fry.
Oh yeah, that's right.
That's really nice.
But that's totally different to like Western aspects of breakfast. Yeah. Reigan mian, though, you think, oh, noodles for breakfast. Well, I'm not going to have that. But the sauce that reigan mian is made from, it very much has like a sort of, I don't know, like a breakfasty taste to it. That's what I think. Maybe
that's because you've eaten it for a year.
Yeah, right, exactly.
You can also get. Most mornings here, I do go down to the little old lady with the wee shop, and I do get like a kind of Chinese crepe thing where she'll put an egg, a sweet sausage, some chilies in it, and it's kind of similar to the kind of foods I might eat back home.
Right.
But it's not really the same, but it's similar.
But on that subject, I think I just heard last week that wrap isn't even proper Chinese food. It's like Taiwanese.
Oh, is it?
Oh, there we go.
Apparently.
There is one other big Wuhanese food, and that is duck neck. Have any of you guys tried duck neck?
No.
So it was only me.
Yeah.
You had that, right?
I had duck neck. We were at a party with a bunch of foreigners in Shening, and someone brought duck neck.
Here's the duck neck for the party. Now the party can start.
Yeah, pretty much. So it was like a bag of duck necks. So there was like 30 or 40 of them. And
it sounds like the worst party ever.
yeah, totally. But I went in and a couple of the Chinese dudes were eating it. I was like, right, well, how do I do it? And he didn't speak any English, but he just like showed me the duck neck in his hand and then just like threw it in his mouth. And obviously it's like cartilage and bone and all that kind of stuff, and there's very little meat actually on it.
Yeah.
So he just starts chomping it down, and I'm like, right, okay. So he's chewing on it for maybe about 20 seconds, and then he just like spits the rest of it out onto the table. And he's like, yum, duck neck. And I was like, okay. So I tried it, but obviously I didn't want to shove the whole thing in my mouth, so I tried to eat it like a corn in the cob. And it didn't really work because
it
was so spicy that my lips were like dancing with pain. Like it was the worst thing I've ever eaten in my life. But yeah, that is typically Wuhanese / Hubei province food. Before we go on to talking about like provincial food, provincial,
thank you.
Before we go on to talk about provincial food, I would like to go over one little thing. And the word restaurant is used quite loosely here in China. So, Ruth, could you tell me a little bit about what a restaurant could be in China?
You do, in the kind of big shopping malls, you do have what we would probably recognise as a restaurant back home. But they're normally a lot more expensive, and you would go for maybe a nice meal at the weekend. You wouldn't eat there every day. And then a lot of the other restaurants are just kind of shop units that have been made into a restaurant. There are some tables. The kitchen tends to be like, you can see into it, which is not always a good thing. And yeah, they're pretty basic. It's kind of what you would expect. I don't know, it's kind of what I expected when we came here. They're always kind of full of people. Mm-hmm. The general kind of foreigner and foreign place rule, where if there's lots of people eating there, then you should go, tends to apply.
But they vary in their quality.
Right.
Well, not in a food sense. You know, you can get really great foods almost everywhere here. But from a cleanliness point of view, obviously, it can be questionable from time to time. You know, I've seen restaurants where there are like massive extractor fans dripping with icicle oil. You'll walk by and someone will be frying up food, and the ventilation will be so terrible that you'll inhale it and cough up a lung or whatever. So I would call that a restaurant here.
Also, you sometimes see some cockroaches.
Yeah,
that's part of the experience.
It's like not only do you get a meal, but you get to go to the zoo and see all these weird and wonderful animals of China.
There was that one restaurant that Lewis and I went right in beside where the seating area was. There was just racks of ducks hanging from their necks, and their bodies were stripped. They were like out in the gulag for everyone to see. It was absolutely hilarious.
I don't think you can compare like a Russian labor camp to a restaurant in
China. You weren't in that restaurant. I was.
I'm sure the ducks were having a worse time than you.
In all fairness, in that restaurant, I did see them. They were skinning a dog in that restaurant. It was kind of... It had the best rugamian that I've ever had in my life. So, you know, you've got the positives and you get the negatives, right? And also, you'll find with a lot of the smaller restaurants, it is, Ruth was saying, it's someone's house. You go to the back of the restaurant and look round the door and there's just a wee bed there. And a toilet. They're having a snooze. Now that we've talked a little bit about what restaurants are, maybe we should go on to provincial foods. Thank you very much. Okay, so what is the food generally like here in Hubei province, the province we're in?
I'd say it's spicy. Much more spicy than I was expecting. But very enjoyable. Yeah. Not that I want to be too brief or Jen.
No, I think that sort of covers it.
This area of China is known as like the hot basin or the hot desert or something like that.
The oven of China.
The oven of China.
Weather-wise, Wuhan is like the furnace of central China.
But doesn't that encumber like their food as well, though? I always assumed.
Probably,
their food, the climate.
Everything is hot.
The fiery passions of the people who live here.
But Hubei food is nowhere near as spicy as food from Sichuan province. Because they have Sichuan peppercorns and they are extremely spicy. Like some of the spiciest food I've ever tasted.
You went to Sichuan to eat it, right?
No, not in Sichuan itself. We were in Changsha, which is in Hunan province, which also has some very interesting foods that Ruth will probably tell you about later. But we went to a Sichuanese restaurant in Changsha and we had authentic Sichuanese food there. Like it varied. There was a hot pot with like an entire cow in it, and there was a plate of cold cucumber. There were like shredded pork that was also cold, but it was all doused in this spicy Sichuan peppercorn sauce, and it really does. Like, I'm not over exaggerating. It really does make your mouth feel as if you've been to the dentist. It's that like effective.
Oh, it's the whole deal with your eyes are sweating, your nose is running, your skin's peeling off from inside your mouth. It's really hot,
Yeah, no, that's exactly what it's like.
Yeah.
And the food is a little bit different in the Shanghai region, but it's supposed to be sweeter, right? Than most of the other. So, and then also in Beijing, obviously we've got it's very popular for duck. So did you guys manage to have duck when you were up there?
Yeah, we did. It was really nice. We went to quite a quiet restaurant because there's one really famous restaurant that we tried to go to. It was like an hour and a half waiting time, which I just...
And it was also like 300 kwai for duck and all the trimmings.
So it's like £30 or something? Yeah.
Which is very expensive for a meal in China.
Considering in Wuhan here, maybe about 5 minutes away from the school, you can get a duck for 22 kwai, which is £2.20.
Yep.
Right. We had duck in Beijing, didn't we, mate?
Yeah.
And it was probably the best thing I've ever eaten. Not in China, like ever. We bought a whole duck between the four of us, and the first thing they did is they cut off all the skin, and they brought that out, and they had pancakes, and they had the plum sauce, and they had like fresh light vegetables. And then after that, they just kept on bringing servings of different cuts of the duck.
But no neck.
No neck, thank God, or no head, or no feet, no ring piece, like anything like that. But it was, I can't describe how good it was.
I do wonder how they got the skin to taste the way it did, because it had a texture to it and a flavour to it that surely isn't just how delicious Peking ducks usually taste.
They cook them in like a furnace and they use special wood, so I think it depends on which wood that they burn it with that determines the flavour of the duck.
Another great place in China to get very interesting and specific cuisine is in Xi'an, which is famous for the terracotta warriors, if you've ever heard of it. And there is a large community of people from the very western parts of China in Xinjiang province. They're called like Uyghur people, and they're Muslims, and they have a very specific way of cooking food and like very different tastes to other foods in China. And Ruth and I visited Xi'an not that long ago. In the Muslim quarter, there's some of the most interesting food I've had in China was there. So I had this thing called rojama, which is like a Chinese hamburger. It's like the most tender, delicious beef piled into like a pita bread sandwich. There is something else called fengzhengrou, which is like mutton mixed with wheat and then steamed. Also really, really interesting. Doesn't sound too great, but it tasted wonderful. It tasted like stuffing, actually. And they are very famous for pulling their own noodles.
Right, yeah, sure.
So we go to a place here in Wuhan, which is run by people from Xinjiang, and they pull their own noodles in front of you, and they're all different types of noodles, flat noodles, long noodles, thick noodles, and the sauce that they cook them in, I don't know, it's like very, very not Chinese, like almost like Mediterranean, I would say, but like Middle Eastern obviously would be a closer example.
Yeah, I really enjoy, because the restaurant we go to in Wuhan that is Muslim noodles, the guy at the front, this is just his job, just to pull noodles, but it's like a massive show he's putting on for all of us. Like, it's like hypnotizing watching him, because he's just got like a massive bit, essentially like a bit of dough.
Yeah, he must be absolutely ripped.
Yeah, totally. He's just like smashing it off the counter to pull it out, and then he does it again, and then he does it again, and then he does it again, and then the whole thing turns in. It is like, maybe actually we could record it and put it on our Twitter or our Facebook,
That would be cool,
because it is really interesting to watch. I don't think a lot of people have been actually seen that. Okay, so we've been talking about food for a bit now, but we haven't really mentioned how anything is cooked or how it tastes and all that kind of stuff. So I think we will go over the best and worst food that we've had in China. Ruth, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, I think the best thing about the food here is there's always something new to discover. I feel like every day I'm learning like a new word or to describe a different type of food. I really like going out for dinner and ordering like lots of different food, and then like you were talking about how it's almost like tapas and we all share, because I tend to get quite a lot of food envy. I always order the wrong thing, so this kind of minimises that from happening. Normally we'll get like a few meat dishes and some vegetables, and kind of on the day-to-day I tend to eat a lot of like aubergine or eggplant. It tends to be like fried and comes in a sauce, and you have that with rice. That seems to be what I like to eat most days. I think the best food that I've had was probably in Xi'an. The food was just so different and exciting and really, really lovely. And probably the worst food that I've had, when we worked in Changsha over the Spring Festival, I went out for lunch with my teaching assistant, and she took me to this restaurant, and it was really lovely, and she ordered all this food, which was really generous and kind of her. But so like stinky tofu was Chairman Mao's favourite food. It's fermented tofu that they deep fry and then serve with chili sauce, and it's absolutely foul. It smells disgusting, and when you have it in your mouth you can smell it while you're chewing it. I nearly threw up at the table, and I felt terrible because my lovely friend Annie, who'd ordered all this food and paid for our meal, was like, "Oh, do you like it? It's so delicious. It's a speciality of this province," and she was really excited that I was trying it, and it was by far the worst thing that I've ever eaten.
Yeah, I suppose if something smells like feet, I wouldn't want to eat it either.
Oh my god, Dean, it smells like a rotten corpse. It's so disgusting.
It's like, you can always tell if there is a vendor for stinky tofu because you will smell it about a mile away.
Yeah.
And you just need to follow that horrid smell and you'll find the guy who's frying it up and throwing it out like it's candy. Did you not also have like a questionable soup at that dinner as well?
There were pictures of the soup in the menu and she was like, which one do you think looks nice? And I just kind of didn't really want to be bossy. So I was like, oh, I don't mind, you choose, praying that she wasn't going to pick the one that she ended up ordering, which was like seafood and, I don't know, some kind of like meat. Oh, that was also disgusting. It was just generally not a good time. Seaweed is also not my favourite food.
Yeah, they have seaweed here in like little packets, don't they? Like dried seaweed. Mm-hmm. And it's like, the only way I can describe it is like, I don't know if they have them in the US, but in the UK they have these things called Mawam bars.
Yeah.
And they're just like little soft sweeties. But that's what the seaweed is like here. You can buy bags and bags of this seaweed and the kids go mental for it. It's absolutely disgusting.
I think like most kids though, I think everyone in China really loves like dried food, like dried seaweed. Like kids in my class last year would be like having a snack during class. It would be like dried squid, dried chicken's feet in a vacuum packed thing that they would just produce, and it smelled terrible, it looked terrible, and they were just chewing away at the back of the class.
They would, offer you it because you're the foreign teacher and they love you, so they want to give you a present, but they'd be eating their, like, dried chicken's foot, and they'd come up to you at 9 o'clock in the morning and shove it in your face, and they'd be like, teacher, eat! And you're like, no, this is the last thing I want to eat.
Have I offended you?
Yeah.
Have I offended you in any way? Why are you doing this to me?
Yeah, I know, this is not nice. Please leave me alone.
What's the best food you've had, dude?
I would say my favorite, I would have to agree with Ruth, my favorite food was in Xi'an. Rojama, the like Chinese hamburger, was so delicious, and you can't really get it anywhere else in China. If we're talking in Wuhan, like, I like to have pork dishes most of the time. Like, I have this dish that's like tofu and fried pork on like a bed of rice. That's like my go-to meal for like a lunch. I also really like aubergines, like Ruth. It's hard for me to pick my favorite food because there are just so much like delicious food to have. Worst food though, I can easily tell you, and that is lotus root. It has this very perfumey taste to it, and they always cook it to make it like really crunchy as well. And it's just not nice. It tastes like you've gone into your like mum's dresser and like drank all her perfume. Like it's not nice at all. I also want to like tell listeners at home, one of the surefire ways to get something terrible to eat in China is if you go to a restaurant and they have a badly translated English menu. Some of the names of the things that they translate it to in English are hilarious. But if you're like fumbling about, you don't know what to order, you can't speak Chinese, you can't read Chinese, and they give you this translated menu, you're going to have to point and say, I want that one, regardless of what it says, because it probably doesn't make any sense at all.
So say back home, if you translate it, it would be like what the meat is and what the vegetables are. But here, it's either they translate it like how it's been cooked or one specific ingredient that's in it. So like there was this one thing and it was like double cooked blood or whatever. And it's like, that doesn't mean anything. That could be anything. But it ended up just being a beef dish or whatever.
Right.
You're never going to pick that because it's called double cooked blood.
Right.
Well, I think part of the problem with the translation menus, translating Chinese into English, you can take it too literally.
Yeah.
And if their English is not very good for them, they will just say, okay, that's the interpretation. That's the meaning. And it's like really literal in English.
Shredded bullfrog entrails.
Yeah.
So awful.
The nuance is not, it's
My
just
friend,
lost in translation.
My friend Stephen sent me a picture of a menu and it had been translated to stir-fried Wikipedia.
Oh, sweet.
Wonder what Wikipedia tastes like.
I did see one translated menu that one of our work colleagues forwarded me on WeChat, and it was hand-shredded ass meat. It was like a really literal translation, and I thought, I want to try that.
In the restaurant in Beijing that we went to, when we walked really far to find somewhere and it was closed, there was a picture menu and it had been translated, and one of the things on that was fried enema.
That is rough.
Yeah.
Food that I like, just to dive straight into it. Day to day, I will like youtiao. I'm not a big breakfast eater, and it's just like, as we mentioned earlier, thin bit of fried bread. I'm not a fan of rice or noodles, so I do struggle here with a lot of the food. But there's plenty that I do like. Chietsu, that's the aubergine dish, is nice. It's got the garlic, it's got the aubergines. And in the UK, aubergines is not something I would ever have thought to have. So it's really not, I always enjoy it. I'm going to disagree with you. I quite like lotus root, especially in the Chinese barbecues they have. I like a lot of their barbecue foods on the skewers. They'll have corn on the cob and there'll be a spicy sort of sauce on it. There'll be the lotus roots. They'll get sweet bread they also put on those. That's really nice as well. I really, really like twice cooked beef and twice cooked pork. I've had that before. And I think that's how they cook it is it's steamed and then it's fried. So it's really soft and tender. Food that I really detest, stinky tofu. Tofu generally is not for me. So that's been a learning curve about how much it's just bombarded with it. I don't like the hot dry noodles.
Oh no, me too.
I don't like
I
it.
also don't like those.
I like a lot of the same things as you guys do. I love the twice cooked beef, and it's always done with like onions and peppers and all that kind of stuff, which is really nice. I also like this one called tudo pien, and it is finely sliced potato, and that's normally cooked in like a chili sauce. If we ever go out, I always like make sure that we have that.
Yeah, you always order that.
Yeah,
so
I'm always like diving in like tudo pien, because it's so good. There is Shanghai Thai, which is pak choy, and that's normally cooked in like a garlic and it's like an oil and garlic dressing, which is fantastic.
Garlic's quite big here in most of the foods as an ingredient, which I really like.
I think they normally throw it in almost everything you eat in Wuhan, I guess, or in Hubei. There is garlic and chilies, I would say, in it.
With my Italian heritage, I'm used to that.
Yeah. And I also like, there was a new dish actually that we've been having, and it's kung pao chicken. I don't know what the Chinese name, do you remember what it is?
Yeah, it's a gung pao jiding.
Yeah, gung pao jiding, and that is really nice. I think it's got a bit of aubergines, but it's got little cubes of chicken, and it's cooked in like a relatively spicy sauce, and it's really nice. And then I love jingjiao rosa, which is, as Tony said, the green peppers and the pork on a bed of rice.
Have any of you guys ever tried eating the chicken feet here?
Yes, I have.
It's grotesque, isn't it?
Yeah, like it was similar to your experience with the duck's neck. I was told, take it, put it in your mouth, crunch it all up, suck out all the like meat and nutrients and juices, and then just spray all the bones and
it's so salty,
yeah,
which really surprised me.
Yeah, there's like no meat on it at all. Like I don't understand why people think of it as a nice snack to eat.
I mean, like, people probably wouldn't think haggis is a nice snack to eat. So, like...
Is that the worst thing you've ever had?
Oh, no. I hope that... Right, okay. So, the worst thing I had, me and Dean, I'm not going to say where it was, but me and Dean went out and had dinner at someone's house. And they gave us a traditional Chinese dish. It was like bread, wasn't it? It was like meaty bread, right?
Yeah, something like that.
In a soup. But the soup was like thick and syrupy, and the only way I can describe it is it was a bowl of bogies. And it was the worst thing I have. You got like halfway through it. I had one spoonful and I was like, I'm really sorry. I just do not like this at all.
Well,
did you say that? Were you honest?
I was honest. Well, I was like, I wasn't gonna power through it and then be sick. And I'm not gonna leave it there and not say anything. So I was just like, I'm really sorry. I really appreciate all the work you've done. But I can't eat this.
Well, it's because I'm a greedy person with food. I decided to eat half of it before I decided I didn't like it. But it was like a sort of jelly kind of texture you see in like tin of dog meat at the top of it, or tin of spam.
Yeah.
But it was, and the worst thing was, there was a really old lady cooking it for us, like the granny of the house, and I felt really bad because she didn't eat with us. She wouldn't eat, so she was just in the kitchen slaving away over this.
She wouldn't eat with you because it sounds like it was disgusting. And she played this horrible joke.
Pan this shit off to the far end of the tree.
It wasn't April the 1st, was it? No.
So I take it because you hated it so much you didn't find out what it actually was.
No. Well, to be honest, I don't really want to go any further than trying to like sit the top layer of this gross stuff off. But no, yeah, I think that was probably the worst thing I've eaten. So I have another story. It's a combination of the best and the worst food I've ever had. There was a small restaurant near us where we lived, and it was mostly for students. And it was like a buffet, and it was like really cheap food, and it was amazing because you used to get breaded chicken, and I couldn't really find that anywhere else. And then there was pak choy, which I loved. There was tudo pien, which I always loved. So it was like all my favorite dishes in one. So I went there, you'd get some rice, you'd get all of the dishes that you like, put it on top of the rice, you get a Coke, and it was like £1 for the whole thing. But This buffet was pretty ghetto, to say the least. There was no cough guard. There was like heaps of spatulas, but everybody was just mixing them. So like the one that went in the fish went in the vegetables, the one that went in the vegetables went in the chicken, went in the beef, and all that kind of stuff.
That's Ruth's worst nightmare.
Oh yeah, I hate mixing food.
So even though you picked just chicken, you would probably get a little bit of fish in it anyway, just because that's what was on the spoon. Needless to say, this food made me horrendously sick every single time I ate it, but I still went back every day because I was like, this food is amazing. Is it worth the pain of being on the toilet every night? Yes, it is. So I would go back again.
So you got food poisoning and went back?
Yeah, the food was really good, wasn't it?
Oh my God.
Clearly not.
Especially the little crunchy bread thing with the
Aye.
sesame seeds on it.
Aye,
That was
yeah.
really awesome. Mind you, I think I got a bit sick once when I ate there.
Did they shit you off the face of the earth as well?
Yeah, I it was like the Battle of the Somme. Yeah.
I mean, like, it wasn't like... Right, I'm actually not going to go into detail about my bodily functions. Okay, never mind. Right, we'll move on to
So
something
that's like
else.
your favourite topic of conversation.
I know, but like, I need to make sure we've got some listeners before I just talk about my shit for
In
the
3
rest of
months, it is going to
Yeah.
be like, welcome to Wuhan Weekly, the podcast about 4 Scottish teachers talking about their poo.
Yeah, pretty much.
Because there are often times where we have poor food, there are things that we can fall back on that we know are good, that are popular in China. So, Lewis, like, what is an example of that?
Well, we have this very famous restaurant here in China that rhymes with Sack Ronald's. And it's bad in saying because, like, you come out to China for the culture and for the food and all that kind of stuff, but I go to it quite a lot. But yeah, as you said, like, normally when you're like, oh, I'm kind of sick of having rice today, or I'm not feeling 100%, I just want something that I know I will be fine after I eat it. So yeah, there's like fast food chains like McDonald's, there's KFC, right? There's Pizza Hut. But Pizza Hut is a bit different than it is back home because they've tried to change it into like an Asian style restaurant.
And it's kind of more upmarket than what we consider Pizza Hut to be.
If you go to Pizza Hut, you're normally considered you've got like a bit of money on you. And I don't know, is there any other, have I missed any fast food places?
Not fast food joints. There are Chinese fast food joints like Deco's and Pala, Enjoy My Taste.
So,
Which is irony if I ever heard it.
So like Deco's and Pala, Enjoy My Taste, they are essentially Macca's and KFC knockoffs, right?
Yeah.
And like the reason that we like go to the restaurant that rhymes with, well,
I think I've already said
that. The reason we go to McDonald's is, you know, because it's hard to get good Western food in China, and there are times where you just need to have something that isn't rice or noodles. It's a good and relatively cheap place to get it. If you want to get like a good like hamburger, you're going to have to go halfway across the city and probably end up paying like 10 times what you usually pay for your lunch or your dinner. So in McDonald's, it's still really cheap. It's cheaper than at home, I think. And you know what you're getting, and you know it's going to be at least okay. And you know it's going to be filling. So it's like a good thing to fall back on if an unhealthy and tragic one. Because, you know, like you said, you don't come to China and go to McDonald's all the time. That's wrong.
But as you say, I mean, some days you just you think to yourself, right, I need a Macca's.
Yeah.
I need something which isn't Chinese food.
Yeah.
And one thing I don't think many people might appreciate as much, I mean, I certainly didn't realise it until I came out here, was that in China you eat Chinese food or you eat from these fast food chains.
Yeah.
There's not a lot. It's very hard to get, like, say, an Indian curry or anything like that.
But you can get those things.
Right. Yeah.
They're really expensive and
yeah.
hard to find.
Yeah.
But there are other things that you can do that aren't McDonald's. Like sometimes Ruth and I have been to the supermarket and got sushi because it's so popular here, obviously. Like they love, in China, despite attitudes towards Japanese people as a whole, they love like Japanese culture. And one of the, like a big thing about Japanese culture is sushi. And so, you can get it in the supermarket. There are specific restaurants. There are people on the street that sell sushi. There's a woman who stands outside the school gate when all the kids are being picked up by their parents who sell sushi. So that's one other thing you can get.
So obviously, as well as getting stuff from the supermarket or going to these fast food restaurants, there's quite a big barbecue scene where we are. So if you walk down the street to where all the restaurants are at maybe about 7 o'clock, they bring tables outside and they bring out barbecues. You can literally get anything. It is all just on a stick. So there is just like countless amounts of meat that you can get on a stick. You can get, we had corn last night, right?
Yeah.
You can get aubergines, you can get lotus root, you can get bread as well on a stick, which is good.
Fried cucumber with like herbs and spices on it.
That's
It's so
good,
delicious.
yeah.
And then there's also, that's Chinese barbecue.
Right.
There's also Korean barbecue, which is like more of like a sit down thing in restaurants. And you have this little like barbecue unit in the center of your table. You go up to essentially like a buffet bar. You take all your like raw foods and you come back and you cook it on the barbecue yourself.
So normally those Korean barbecue things are like all you can eat for X amount of quell.
Yeah.
So you'll go in and you can be there. I think there's like a time limit on some of the places.
Like 6 hours.
Yeah. So that basically you don't sit there from breakfast to dinner.
I think also like fast food, aside from McDonald's and KFC and kind of the Western chains, I suppose like fried rice and fried noodles, there's always somebody in the street with a stall selling that, and that's really easy and quick to get if you're in a hurry, or if you just don't want to cook, or you don't want to like go through the sometimes difficult process of ordering food when you can't speak Chinese. And things like fried dumplings as well, we eat those quite a lot just when we can't be bothered or we're feeling lazy.
They're just like stalls on the side of the road as well, aren't they? Yeah. I think there's one other thing I want to talk about, and it's hot pot. So we went for a hot pot for your birthday, right? Was it, Ruth?
We tried to go for hot pot, but the restaurant was really busy. But Tony and I went for hot pot.
Yeah.
And that's cool. You just get like a big bowl of soup and then you add things to it and you cook everything together. It's really nice.
Like essentially the same premise as barbecue, except you're boiling your food instead of barbecuing it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it can like vary in terms of quality, obviously, but...
What kind of things would they chuck into it?
They have like essentially an animal in a big boiling pot, and they can give you like all different types of vegetables. I've seen people with like other types of meat that you can fire in, like thinly sliced meat. And yeah, it's stuff like that.
You choose the broth as well.
Yeah,
right?
that's
So
right. That's
they
what I
come
mean.
in.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it's hot pot is quite cool, but I find that like since I've paid for my food, I don't want to have to fish out a pot,
Right.
and
Yeah.
it drives me insane.
Yeah, that is like an interesting cultural phenomenon here. Like, why do people like want to go out and pay to cook their own food when you could just pay to cook, or you could just
Yeah.
not pay to cook your own food at home?
Like, I don't like going out for Korean barbecue and going to sit in a restaurant because it's always really hot. You have to cook your food. I would rather, if you're paying a lot of money, I would rather someone else just did it for
Right,
me.
exactly. And like with Chinese barbecue, like it's not expensive and they
No.
cook it for you. You
Yeah.
go to Korean barbecue, it's a wee bit more expensive, but you have to cook it yourself.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I mean, there has been an occasion where I've went to a Korean barbecue and one of the ladies at the shop has cooked it for us.
Okay.
But I
That's
don't know
very
whether-
few and far between, though, isn't
Yeah,
it?
it's
If
not
they have
common.
someone there, they'll
Yeah.
just do it for you.
Yeah.
Okay, so my brother Blair also wanted to know what the school dinners were like. Do you want me to just take this one?
Yeah, well, like
Yeah.
Lewis has to go for breakfast with the
Yeah.
children in the morning,
Yeah.
so he's best placed to have an opinion on it.
Back home, school dinners are very hit and miss anyway. And it's the same here in China. On good days for breakfast, I go down and it's rogamian. That's great. Or it's some sort of fried sticky rice. I'm fine with that. Yesterday, though, I went down and they have this meat called it's just called shredded meat, right? And it looks like ginger pubic hair. And
It's called meat floss. Is
Meat
what it's
floss,
called.
meat floss.
And they sell it in like bakeries.
Yeah.
Inexplicably.
yeah. So I had a lovely bit of bread that had this meat floss on either side. So I ripped the meat floss off. I was like, I'm not having that because it's disgusting. And then I bite into this bread and inside it is the sweetest mayonnaise I have ever eaten. So I had that for breakfast along with red bean. I say soup, it's water. Red bean water. So 9 times out of 10, the breakfast will be some form of soup like that and something else like the bread.
Get the book, just thinking.
Yeah. But also what they do, especially at breakfast in the canteen, they'll always have eggs, just hard-boiled eggs. So worst comes to worst, you can just have a couple of hard-boiled eggs, which is fine.
Unless they're black.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Or you can get the black eggs, which are fermented eggs, right? That have been in the pit of Sarlacc for 50 years. For lunch, again, it's very hit or miss. The first time we came here, actually, for the first lunch, we had meat, veg, and rice. And I was like, awesome. The school dinner is going to be like that for the rest of the time. But then we went back the next day and it was aubergine thing, which I don't really like, followed by fish, which I don't like. And then it looked like a souffle of egg. And it was wobbling like jelly, and it was disgusting.
Yeah, it looked like a dessert, but it was egg.
I've had that before, but in a restaurant not made at school dinners, and it wasn't terrible.
I don't know what you guys. The school dinners are pretty hit and miss, right?
Yeah, like more often than not, we're given school dinners a miss. We do have it from time to time, and it does vary, but most of the time it's pretty bad.
Yeah.
Well, I've only had the school dinners twice. And each time it was just an absolute disaster.
Aye.
And I don't like school dinners anyway. I never did as a kid.
So I think one thing we were going to talk about as well was food that we missed from back home in case somebody was feeling generous and perhaps wanted to send us something out. So what do you guys miss from back home?
Shout out to my parents and their fantastic Italian food. I miss your lasagna.
As a true Scotchman.
Oh, wow.
As a true Scotsman, I miss Iron Brew, obviously. When I went back and had some Iron Brew, I was almost in tears. It was so good. What about you, Dean?
For me, it would be my grand's homemade soup, good Highland broth, and this it's not really, well, I'm just going to say it, Kinder Buenos.
Kinder Buenos?
I miss Kinder Buenos. Like, you can't imagine, I have nightmares where they're running far ahead of me and I can't quite reach them.
You can buy them in Carrefour.
Yeah, they taste like crap over here though.
Oh, okay. I miss cereal bars, Eat Natural bars, the ones with peanuts in them. They come in a blue packet.
They are 69p from any good
supermarket, yeah. So I miss those. I also really miss avocados. They're quite hard to find here, and they can be quite expensive. Avocados probably my favourite food.
Or just a really good Indian curry.
Yeah, that would
curry.
Like lamb curry or something.
Okay, so we have a new segment at the end of the show, and we hope this will be recurring. We got an email from Frank, and he's had a very interesting life in education. He's been doing it for 25 years, and he's been working with deaf students and students with behavioural difficulties. And he wanted to ask us a couple of questions. So his first question was, does your weekly face-to-face time with the students vary?
The face-to-face time will vary, remembering how many kids are in each class. So that is not a case where you will have a chance to have one-on-one, unless maybe it's a 10-minute break and a kid comes up and chats to you and tries their English out that way. Generally, most of the time, it's trying to get as much speaking time with the kids and having the kids speak to each other, and you sort of monitor as you go around the class and dive in and out of group discussions.
Yeah, like we said before, there are 50 kids in a class, and obviously that makes one-on-one scenarios extremely rare.
Yeah.
It's always really funny at the end of class when especially if you're teaching grade 1 and grade 2, their language ability is quite limited, so they'll just come up to you and ask you questions that, they've learned in class. Things like, this week we've been doing emotions, so like, how are you? I'm happy. Or what's your name? So the conversation tends to be quite stilted and difficult, and then they'll try and speak to you in Chinese, which is just kind of very difficult for us. But
in terms of collective face-to-face time, how often are you in front of the children? It doesn't vary. We have our timetable. We're in class 2.5 hours a day. Apart from that, you're not really getting a chance to see the kids because they are in class all day. They're in so much school. We have that time and that time alone to make the difference that we want to.
His second question was, do you stick rigidly to lesson plans, or are you able to go off-piste?
I would say that the way that Frank is talking about in his email, rarely happens. That point where the class are getting it so much and that you can start going other places, start talking about other things, start bringing in new vocabulary, start having actual conversation with them. I would say that happens not a lot. Do my lesson plans go to shit and I have to come up with something new on the day? Yes, very, very often.
Invariably, I find with the lesson plans, you'll prepare it in advance. You will probably have to deviate in lesson if the kids struggle with a concept. So you will deviate in the sense that your lesson plans invariably will not go off without a hitch. So that's what I would say about that.
You don't go off your lesson plan in that good sense, It's
Yeah.
always in they're not getting it. We have to spend 10 more minutes on this.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. His last question was, do you decide the objectives and outcomes of the class, of the semester, of the year?
yeah, well, we have a textbook that we have to follow, that we have to stick to. It's quite good in terms of it gives you some goals and objectives, things that you want the kids to learn. There's kind of grammar objectives and speaking objectives, that kind of thing.
A lot of them have a reading list or a words list, right?
Yeah. So there's a vocabulary list and there's different units on different topics. We kind of stick to that, and we're supposed to get through 4 topics before the Spring Festival, Chinese New Year in February, then 4 topics between February and June.
I think that the fact that their outcomes can be both a good thing and a bad thing, it's good that we have that structure to follow, because sometimes when you're just given free rein, it's difficult to really find what students can deal with what subjects and with what learning outcomes. Whereas on the other side, it's very frustrating because some of the outcomes that they give you are just implausibly difficult. For example, one other teacher was talking to me about how in grade 4 they have to talk about dinosaurs and vocabulary to do with dinosaurs. That's absurd.
these kids, they don't know how to say pterodactyl. They're not going to be able to say diplodocus. The teacher I was speaking to could barely say diplodocus himself. Like, they need to have, the outcomes need to be realistic. And if a kid can't tell the difference between he or she, you can't be teaching them about diplodocuses. Diplodocus?
Even we don't know.
Yeah. I think we've mentioned this before, that we kind of run different classes. So I do an international class, which not only do I do the English classes that Ruth, Tony and Dean do, but since I only see one class, I also do PE, and I have comprehensive classes where I can basically choose what I want to do. As long as I do one lesson of maths, one lesson of science, one lesson of art, and one lesson of computing. Because I have all these different classes, I can actually choose the outcomes and objectives of what I want. So, for example, last week, we were looking at what a plant needs to grow. So the learning objectives for that were, we wanted to learn the 5 new vocabulary words, which were sun, water, air, space, and soil. So that was my outcome. And my objective was to make sure that they understood what they needed to grow a plant. And then we did like a little fun experiment where we got a little cup and we decorated the cup, and then we planted a seed and all that kind of stuff. So as the weeks go on and the plant grows, they'll understand that, okay, so all these things we learned actually do mean something in the real world. So I think for myself, I have a little bit more free reign on my objectives and goals. But if you're just doing a standard English class, 9 times out of 10, you will be given all of that material. But I would just like to thank Frank for his question. We really appreciate it. And we hope we can do another segment like this in the following weeks. And I hope that we have answered your questions to the best of our ability. Okay, so that'll be us for this week, guys. I think the topic next week will focus on travel. So if you're interested in that, please listen out for it. You can find us on different social medias. What are they, Tony?
So you can search for us on Facebook, search Wuhan Weekly Pod.
Or you can find us on Twitter at Wuhan Weekly Pod.
You can get us on Gmail at wuhanweeklypod@gmail.com.
And it would be really, really great if you could just follow us, like our page, email us, ask us some questions on any kind of aspect. Maybe you want to know like a little bit more about what we've spoken about today, or you want to suggest a topic for the future. That'd be really, really great. Also, if you could write us a review on iTunes, that would be really helpful as well.
Don't forget to tell your friends about our podcast, because one of the best ways to spread our listenership is for you to recommend us.
Yeah. Oh, and I would like to thank everybody who has already reviewed us on iTunes. We really appreciate that. Okay, so that's us finished this week. I will see you next time, guys. Bye.
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 Bye.